cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. In this hour, we're going to talk about one of the most famous prizes in all of science and technology, the X Prize. Remember Spaceship One, the spaceship that went 70 miles into the sky, carrying pilots. Eventually, it'll carry tourists. Well, the pilot and the backers of the spaceship wanted to claim millions of dollars for the X Prize. And now the X Prize is awarding $20 million if you could put a small robotic package on the moon. And if you want to win $10 million, all you have to do is create a tricorder, something straight out of Star Trek. And with us today is Marcus Shingles, Chief Executive Officer of the X Prize, telling you how you can win $20 million by putting a package on the moon, $10 million by winning the Tricorder X Prize contest, and many other prizes. And once again, let me say that if you want to find out more about science, go to my website. It's mkaku.org, mkaku.org. In fact, we have 3 million fans on Facebook. 500,000 fans pick up my feed on Twitter. So find out about my last 3 New York Times bestsellers. Physics of the Impossible talks about time travel, teleportation, invisibility, all the stuff you see in the movies. My next New York Times bestseller was Physics of the Future, talking about robots, space travel. What will the future look like 20, 50, 100 years in the future? And my last book actually hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's called The Future of the Mind. Telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, uploading memories. Did you know that we can do all of the above? This is, again, straight out of science fiction, but we do it in the laboratory. Compliments of physics. So with physics, we're able to peer right into the living brain, and we're able to actually extract thoughts and images. Get this, images from the thinking brain. Find out about this. Find out about the funding, which of course comes from the United States government and private corporations. The book, once again, is called The Future of the Mind. But once again, today we're going to talk about prizes in science. You know, Charles Lindbergh won a prize, and Charles Lindbergh helped to jumpstart aviation. Well, now we can perhaps use the X Prize to jumpstart packages to the moon, commercial exploration of outer space, space tourism, and also medical research a la Star Trek. So now I want to talk to you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a new board game you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play this game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There are hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution in the Beginning is available now, only at Target stores. Just look for the big dinosaur on the box in the game section. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. You'll find it all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning. And once again, if you want to find out more about this program and get on this program, give us a call. Our hotline number is 866-323-2129. Give us a call, and you can have your thoughts heard on over
Network.com.
I want to talk with you about Evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution the Beginning is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Are you a baby boomer? Afraid of stocks and commodity prices? Want to invest but don't know what to do? Discover the alternative asset class Barron's Magazine describes as both lucrative and safe. Discover high yields without market volatility. Request a prospectus guide. Call Cornerstone at 800-222-INFO. 800-222-INFO. That's 800-222-INFO.
If you have sciatica, then you know all about the crippling pain that travels from your lower back down your leg when a spasm occurs. It's brutal. In fact, it's enough to take your breath away. Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream helps relieve persistent, shooting pains associated with the sciatic nerve in the lower back and legs. This natural, homeopathic cream contains the most potent ingredients to soothe even the most excruciating pain associated with sciatica. Stop the pain now. Ask for Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream at your local health food store or go online to trasknutrition.com.
As a business owner, or CEO for that matter, are you frustrated with the money you're wasting on advertising? How do I know it's being wasted? Because you see your advertising as an expense. I started my company because I was tired of seeing passionate business owners waste advertising dollars. So what if I could show you how to make your advertising a profit center in 30 days, guaranteed? I know what you're thinking. That's bull. Then challenge me. At no cost to you, I'll show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. If this is important to you, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Today, for this hour, we're talking about the X Prize. Perhaps you've heard of it. We're talking about potentially $20 million prize given to somebody who can literally put a commercial package on the moon. You can forget about the Cold War and the race between the United States and the Soviet Union. We're talking about an organization, a foundation, a nonprofit foundation called the X Prize, which gives you cash awards for making milestones in the history of technology. Maybe you heard about the Ansari X Prize, won by a team which was the first to carry 3 people to 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface twice within 2 weeks. We're talking about eventually, perhaps that'll spur the whole question of space tourism. Well, with us today to talk about the X Prize is the Chief Executive Officer of the X Prize, Marcus Shingles. We should also point out that he was a partner at Deloitte Consulting, and he's worked with many of the Fortune 500 companies as an entrepreneur, and he's with us today as CEO of the X Prize Foundation. So, Marcus, glad you could be on Science. Fantastic.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Well, first question we ask everybody is, how did you as a youth first get interested in science, technology, and also, in your case, being an entrepreneur?
Well, yeah, I come from a family of professors, so it helped educationally to have I have a father who's a political science professor and a mother that was a math professor, both very involved in technology. At early stages, they sent me to computer camp, of course, back in the day, and I think my first entree to really understand the real power of science and technology was when I worked in one of my first careers was at the Kellogg Company in Battle Creek, Michigan. And I was actually in sales and marketing, but I knew how to program, I knew how to develop, I knew how to code. And I started to build software that I could use myself to help me do my sales and marketing administration, analysis, analytics, data. And it started to get noticed by the company that, some new hire was starting to send in a lot of their reports all typed up. And they said, "You don't have to type this stuff up, Marcus." And I said, "Well, I'm not typing it up. I run it through my printer because I have an app that does it all for me." And so that kind of started my thinking that, technology is really, the more you know about STEM, the more you know about technology, about the science, about coding, about development, it just creates unique career paths for you that really differentiate you, and ended up building a lot of technology that the company started to use, and launched that career into a consulting career at Ernst & Young. For a while, I was an entrepreneur for about 7 years, and then, as you indicated, I left Deloitte Consulting as a partner there, where I led a practice that was focused on very disruptive technologies, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, advanced robotics, biotech, nanotech, quantum computing, these field of technologies we call exponentials, and how do large corporations use them to solve big business problems or opportunities. And then the switch to X Prize was that same logic and the same thinking, but to solve grand social problems using very innovative and progressive means and exponential trends in technology.
Okay, now tell us about the X Prize itself. It got a lot of publicity when Spaceship One, a privately financed spaceship, went, 70 miles into the atmosphere and came down successfully. So tell us a little bit about the X Prize itself.
Yeah, a lot of the legacy and the history of X Prize with folks like Greg Marinak and Peter Diamandis. Peter Diamandis is the executive chairman and founder of X Prize. I was honored to take his role as CEO not too long ago. I've been working with Peter for years. Peter had this vision that he wanted to get into space. He's got 2 degrees from MIT and a doctorate degree from Harvard, a medical doctor, but he didn't want to be a medical doctor. He wanted to be an astronaut. He kind of did the medical doctor thing and got the degree from Harvard to please his family, his parents, but he always wanted to go to space. But then he realized he doesn't have the right profile to get into space. He's not tall enough. He's not, he just didn't. It wasn't going to happen for him. So he wanted to get there, and he's a very determined person, a very brilliant mind. And he said, you know what? He read this book about Charles Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic, and that was to win a prize. I think it was a $25,000 prize that was offered by a wealthy individual, and so he did that to win that prize, and history was made. Of course, those familiar with Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic, and it launched kind of the aviation industry after that. The private aviation industry, and so Peter's kind of light bulb went off in his head, and he said, "You know what? I wonder if I can create a prize that will incentivize private space travel." That will someday get me to space. That was the vision. Like, will someday allow me and my buddies to all get to space, so it's democratized. Space travel gets democratized. So, he put up a $10 million prize under the Arc of St. Louis, and it was 100 kilometers, so approximately 70 miles, up and back down, and having to do that twice in a 2-week period. The reason why it was twice is the whole goal here was to demonstrate reusability, to show that this could be a reusable method and model that individuals could build, that we didn't have to rely on governments or big companies to build. And sure enough, about 10 years ago, because we just had the 10-year anniversary, the Ansari X Prize in the Mojave Desert launched and did it twice in the period of 2 weeks and won the $10 million prize. Richard Branson and others were at the winning ceremony investing in the winning teams, which led to a lot of what is considered the private space industry today.
Okay, and also I guess the United States government is also involved in awarding prizes. There's DARPA, a branch of the Pentagon, which gave the DARPA Challenge Prize for the driverless car. And so here's a prize which helped to create an industry of driverless cars. Care to comment?
Well, I mean, the model behind these prize concepts, I think, on the surface, there's kind of this nice shiny object notion of these prize competitions, but you really have to think about what these are. These are essentially instruments of gamifying innovation, where you create an instrument that you put out to the crowd, you put out to the world and say, if you can solve this, if you can solve X, you get this cash award. And the psychology that goes into creating that instrument is really well thought out, because there's a lot of reasons why an individual would spend their nights or weekends competing on a DARPA challenge or the X Prize challenge with their college buddies or their professor or with their master's school program or with some other individuals that they think are passionate about solving a grand challenge. And so it's not always about winning the money, because you'll have hundreds, if not thousands, of teams competing. And very few of them, if you interview them on why they're competing on these competitions, it's for the money. It's a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because they want to be recognized among their peers. Sometimes it's just the passion they have to be part of this movement and community to solve a big problem. So by gamifying innovation and putting it out in this crowdsourced model to the world, it's a way to solve problems that, quite frankly, we're finding are more difficult for government or business to solve these problems. If government is incapable or can't solve a problem, not innovative enough or progressive in the thinking, if business doesn't have a profit motive to solve a grand challenge or problem the world's facing, well, then who's going to solve it? X Prize, we're actually not going to solve it. We're just going to create an instrument to get someone else in the world to solve it. And we don't care about your background or your resume or what school you went to. If you can solve this, you win, and everybody wins.
And the criteria that you choose for a prize, is one of them the fact that you hope that perhaps a whole industry will be created, like the Ansari X Prize that funded space tourism? The goal would be to one day open up the heavens for tourists. So is that one of your goals?
Yeah, it's to show the world and to show other stakeholders that there's a there. Right, so with the Ansari X Prize, this was in the time that Peter launched this. It was because NASA and others were kind of rolling back their space programs and making these announcements. So there was this void, like who is going to be the innovators, who's going to be the progressive thinkers, the pioneers of space as it starts to look like budgets are being cut. So at that time, it was to show that, individuals or small teams can do this. We're entering an era where the technology is being democratized enough to where small teams and individuals can do only what big government or big business used to do. And therefore, let's put this prize out there. Let's not make it too easy. Let's make it audacious. So it's very much a stretch goal, almost science fiction feeling, but it's science reality. And some of these prizes take years. The Ansari X Prize took years. We have the Google Lunar X Prize, which you mentioned on the top end, which we'll probably talk about, which is in its 7th year. So this is very much, to use a Wayne Gretzky quote, skating to where the puck is going. We try to identify, here is a breakthrough that we know someone in the world is going to be able to solve. Maybe not in the next 12 months or 24 months, but if you look at the technology curve and the exponential trend of the technology, some of the underlying promise of solving it, whether it's new 3D printing technology or biotechnology or artificial intelligence, these are democratized down to an individual level of usage in small teams. And so the goal is to put a prize out there that will show the world this can be done. And I like to say, X Prize gets it from A to X, and the Y and the Z is industry and entrepreneurs, very much to what you're alluding to, which is we will show that there's a there, that there is an innovation breakthrough that someone in the world can come up with, that we're not dependent on big business or big industry or government. But now that it's been shown, yes, there's a market here. Let's get industry. We're very pro-industry. Let's get industry in here so that we can create competition around this and democratize the price over time. Let's show the government that there's new ways of sourcing this innovation. we're nonprofits, so we're not doing it for commercial reasons. We're just trying to show this is something that has to be solved, and we think someone in the world can solve it. We're going to prove it, and then let the rest, let everybody else jump in and enjoy the benefits and take it from there.
Okay, let's say that someone listening to this radio program wants to make a cool $20 million. So if you want to make $20 million, perhaps you want to sign up for the Google Lunar X Prize. So tell us now about what it takes to win the $20 million and in the process go to the moon.
This is a competition that Google and Larry Page and Sergey Brin were helping us design 7 years ago with Peter Diamandis and some others. And the notion here was let's demonstrate that small teams can create technologies and engineering to create robots that can be put on the moon, the surface of the moon. And right now we have many teams around the world that are competing on this that are coming into the finalists. There's a team in Israel called Space IL and a team in the U.S. called Moon Express. They're actually two of the front runners that have that have launch contracts to get their robots up into orbit so they can then do a lunar landing. And so we're very optimistic that in 2017 we will have a significant event that takes place, ideally, where there will be a space race to the moon, and the goal is the competition is to get on the moon, make the landing, and then move, I believe it's 500, not mistake, it's 500 meters. You have to then move and send digital pictures back to of the scene there. So this is new technology.
Well, let's take a short commercial break. And after the break, we're going to talk about what it takes to go to the moon and also something straight out of Star Trek. We're going to...
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. With us today is Marcus Shingles, the CEO of the X Prize Foundation. And we're talking about going to the moon. Now, if you want to win $20 million, all you have to do is create a robotics package and land on the moon, travel 500 meters, and transmit back videos. So, Marcus, tell us a little bit about who's in the running and also the ethics of it, given the fact there are treaties concerning who owns the moon.
In this competition, like I said, it's been running nearly 6 to 7 years. We expect a winner next year in 2017. We're very hopeful. There's 16 teams that are all looking to travel the 240,000 miles that it takes to get to the moon. Out of these 16 teams, they're all working from around the world. Each has kind of an interesting storyline behind those teams. There's a docuseries that J.J. Abrams did that's on the internet right now that actually interviews all the teams. So it's quite interesting to see just the dynamics within these teams and where these teams were formed and how they were formed. There's two teams in particular right now, Space IL out of Israel and Moon Express out of the United States, that have identified launch contracts to get their robots up into orbit by hitching a ride on a space shuttle, either SpaceX or some other. And that's the first step. Now, there's international treaties in the U.S. in particular, but many countries are part of the International Space Treaty, where you just can't be anyone that wants to land on something on the moon. You have to have either very special permission or it's just not allowed for a private citizen or a company to land something on the moon. So in the last several years that there's been work done by the teams themselves as well as by X Prize to actually work with regulatory framework, work with the U.S. government in the U.S. in particular around how to create avenues in which it will be permitted to have this competition play out next year. So there's been a lot of progress in that regard from the teams themselves, actually working and lobbying. And so we're very hopeful that not only will it happen, but it will be an event that won't get anyone in trouble. It'll be something that the world can actually celebrate.
Do you hope to create a new industry out of this?
Yeah, so anytime we do an X Prize, domino can lead to a lot of other dominoes. So, you know, the technology that it takes to win this X Prize not only demonstrates and inspires people, just like any time we do something within space, but it also is working on technology that will allow remote robots to access, heavenly bodies outside of the Earth. So whether it's an asteroid, whether it's the moon, there's a lot of hope and promise with exploring these other celestial bodies that are around the planet Earth in a way that allows us not only to explore them, but in the case of asteroids, mining asteroids for things that we need for our species, and just the whole exploratory notion of looking out into space and having ways to get there, whether it's in person or whether it's through a robot, and to explore.
Okay. Now, also, tell us a little bit about the Tricorder X Prize, a $10 million competition to create something out of Star Trek.
It, again, has been running for years. That's usually the horizon for these competitions when you're trying to solve a big innovation breakthrough or a grand challenge. It usually takes years. The Tricorder Prize is 312 teams that had registered from over 38 countries. There's 29 final competing teams that are from 9 countries, and we're down to the 7 final teams. So it's pretty exciting. I'm actually in San Diego as we speak to meet with the Qualcomm Foundation and Paul Jacobs, the executive chairman and CEO of Qualcomm, because he's the sponsor of this X Prize and the $10 million. And the objective here is to develop a device that will be a tool that's capable of capturing key health metrics and diagnosing a set of 12 diseases from the palm of your hand.
Okay, Marcus, we have to close this segment. But once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Be part of the fun. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Leave your name, call letter to the radio station, and the city you're calling from. And perhaps you can get on 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. 866-323-2129. Give us a call.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Do you worry a lot? If you're forgetful, nervous, moody, or overwhelmed, chances are you're not protecting yourself from the ravaging effects of stress and anxiety. No matter the cause, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, your quality of life, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in as little as 1 to 2 weeks and increase your ability to recall facts, names, and numbers in 4 to 12 weeks. Calm and Clever was created by scientist Kurt Hendricks, a principal investigator in 2 NIH-funded studies on Alzheimer's disease. Try Calm and Clever for 2 months. You'll feel the difference. Call 1-800-758-8746 or go to calmandclever.com.
Hello, I'm Roy Masters. In spite of the fact I dislike asking for financial support for my listeners, I realize the consequence of failing to do so. I will have denied my listeners the second chance to express the grace of paying forward the benefits they receive through my radio program and the Foundation of Human Understanding, the organization I founded over 50 years ago. Your support will make a vital difference with the pledge as little as 63 cents a day throughout this year. Consider a donation of $19.95 per month or whatever you can afford, and help me help others, especially our returning heroes. So for the sake of the military and millions of broken lives, if you haven't done so already, pay it forward, the benefits which you've received throughout the years from one crying in the wilderness. Go to FHU.com/donate, FHU.com/donate. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
I want to talk with you about Evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, The Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the beginning, is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the beginning.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. If you want to be part of the fun, give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Leave your name, call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Once again, our special guest today is Marcus Shingles, CEO of the X Prize. And for those of you who just tuned in, Marcus, once again, explain a little bit about the X Prize, also the Lunar Prize and the Tricorder Prize.
Sure. So, the X Prize is a nonprofit, and we're focused on solving grand challenges by creating essentially instruments that we put out to the crowd, to the world, and we ask the world to solve it. And so we define the problem, and we depend on the creativity and ingenuity of entrepreneurs and individuals across the world to actually come up with the solutions. The way the model works is we essentially gamify innovation by taking a competition, launching it like the Google Lunar X Prize, which cumulatively was a $30 million X Prize, the Tricorder X Prize, which is a $10 million X Prize. And these are all domains where we look at voids in which government is not showing progress or innovation in solving a grand challenge. We don't see industry motive for big business to jump in and solve a grand challenge. And so the question we ask is, well, who's going to then solve that if the traditional means of solving these problems is not there? And that's where we say, okay, well, X Prize, we're actually not going to solve it, but we can create an instrument that we can put out to the world to incentivize some needle in the haystack to come to us that will solve it. And this is particularly a powerful notion when you consider that today in 2016, not only there are 3 billion people connected via the internet, so a lot of people can collaborate and team up, but also there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are walking around with supercomputers in their pockets right now. I mean, we all have in our iPhones technology that is more powerful than what the government had 30 years ago or big businesses had 30 years ago. So essentially we have democratized technology, and in doing so we've democratized problem solving. So X Prize really tries to capitalize on that notion by realizing that there is some genius out there, some engineer, some technician, some scientist, probably from the least expected corner, probably not the quote-unquote expert, but is wired in a way to be able to solve a problem that other people can't solve, and our model just incentivizes that needle in the haystack to come to us. And we've done that through a variety of prize competitions.
Okay, and once again, to win $20 million, what do you have to do concerning the moon? And to win $10 million, what is the criterion to build a tricorder? Yeah,
for the $20 million Google Lunar X Prize, that is successfully placing a robot on the moon's surface. And once placing the robot on the surface, making a lunar landing, traveling at least 500 meters, and then transmitting HD video and images back to Earth, that is the criteria for the winning team. We have 16 teams that are currently competing in the finals, several which have launch contracts to actually get their robots up into orbit, working, as we described, with regulatory framework to make it permissible to actually land on the moon as a private citizen or as a small company. In that competition, we expect to finish next year. It's been running for 7 years, and it's something that we're all looking forward to for next year. In addition to that, you mentioned the Tricorder X Prize, which is a $10 million prize sponsored by the Qualcomm.
Marcus, we're going to have to close this segment, but in the next segment, we're going to continue a discussion of the X Prize, including the Global Learning X Prize. You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Be part of the fun. Give us a call, and you can get on 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number, and you can get on Science Fantastic, is 866-323-2129. Well, once again, with us today is Marcus Shingles, CEO of the X Prize. It's an award-winning organization, nonprofit foundation, and it gives away money if you can accomplish some feat of scientific virtuosity. Putting a robotic package on the moon. Creating something out of Star Trek, a tricorder. And Marcus, tell us a little bit about the Watson AI X Prize now.
Yeah, the Watson AI X Prize we just announced a few months ago on the TED stage in Vancouver. And this is an X Prize that is interesting, too, because the amount of teams that can compete on this X Prize is significant because it's dealing with a technology that is down to the individual level. So it's dealing with artificial intelligence. So we had over 3,500 teams that had pre-registered, which is significant. And the objective here is to develop technology around artificial intelligence that shows the real value of AI in solving grand challenges, solving problems. So it's the partnership between people and AI to solve some of the world's biggest problems, and that's the basis for the competition. And it just got announced, and within 5 years, I think, from the TED talk that we had a few months ago, 5 years from now will be a TED stage talk with the winning teams presenting with the AI their solutions.
Marcus, I understand that you have yet another X Prize. It's called the Global Learning X Prize. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, this is a really interesting concept. This is a $15 million prize, and the goal is to empower children to take control of their own learning. The market failure here is that there's parts of the world that do not have enough teachers or schools, and it will take decades to build that infrastructure. So we want to experiment to see if technology can be used to educate illiterate children. So we're working with UNESCO, the United Nations, the education group, and the government of Tanzania in complete collaboration, where we've identified 4,000 children, many that don't go to school because they can't physically get to school. It takes them a day just to walk to school. So many of them are not going to school. Many of them are actually illiterate. Some of them have never seen reading and writing. And we're working with these 4,000 illiterate children or children in Tanzania and the government to create, first, give them electrical power. Second, we have tablets that were donated by Google. So we have 4,000 tablets, Android tablets. And if you're one of the teams that are competing in this competition, and there were 198 teams that will eventually narrow down to 10, you will be given an 18-month window in which your software will go on these tablets in these villages. And after the 18 months, the metric is a third-grade proficiency in reading, writing, and basic math, and you win the $15 million if you accomplish that.
And what specifically do you have to do to win the prize? You mentioned certain metrics and certain benchmarks, but could you elaborate?
Yeah, so in working on designing this prize, we realized that kids go from kind of the brain works, you go from reading, learning to read, to reading to learn around a third grade level. So the metric we're trying to target is a third grade proficiency in reading, writing, and basic math or numeracy. What the teams have to do, if you were competing on this team, and like I said, we have 198 teams that are competing, to get into the finals, we will down select to 10, and then your software will be put on tablets in these remote villages with a cohort of 300 to 400 children out of the 4,000 for your team. And 18 months will be the testing period. So we'll basically do tests of these cohorts of children before, and then we'll test them after the 18 months. And the objective is, without any supervision, that with these tablets and electrical power and the software from your team, that the children will be able to teach themselves and get to a third grade proficiency. Now, how is that going to happen? Well, the teams will decide. That's the creativity of the crowd. Some will use artificial intelligence and natural language processing in their software. Some will use sensor technology to see if the child's face is confused or not. Many will use gamification of the education. They'll think of a way of gamifying it. We have teams we have a group of artists from Amsterdam that have entered this that are doing really well right now in the competition. We have a group of developers from Bangladesh. We have some grad students from Wales. I mean, it's just a diversity of shots on goal that make this model work, where out of these 200 rapid experiments, we need one needle in the haystack to actually win, and that's when we'll award the $15 million.
Uh-huh. Okay, also moving on, you must have future projects in mind, right? What's
Absolutely.
in it for the future?
Well, so some of the ones that we've launched literally in the last few months was a Carbon X Prize. That was to turn carbon exhaust from a smokestack into something valuable and climate friendly. We have an ocean. We do a lot of work with oceans. We've had Ocean Cleanup X Prize for oil in the past. We have one that we just launched for ocean mapping. We understand the surface of Mars and the surface of the moon better than we do our own planet in terms of the ocean. So we have an Ocean Mapping X Prize. And then we look in the future. What we do is we have an X Prize Institute where we develop roadmaps, essentially where we try to line up what are the series of innovation breakthroughs that we need in a particular domain, like space or learning or health and wellness or safety and security. And we develop these roadmaps to understand kind of the domino effect that we need in terms of breakthrough innovations that we think would be good to put out to the crowd to solve. We've recently designed a Cyber Security X Prize, looking at cyber security. We have a team that's working on an Empathy X Prize, looking at using virtual reality, augmented reality technology, artificial intelligence, other things to create a first-person perspective so you can actually walk in someone else's shoes, and could that be used to teach empathy? We're exploring X Prizes around clean water and some of the water challenges we have in the world. So there's really a series of things, but it's not haphazard. We actually have roadmaps that we create. So there's rhyme and reason to what we focus on and how we focus on it.
Once again, our special guest today was Marcus Shingles, Chief Executive Officer of the X Prize Foundation. And Google it, xprize.org, O-R-G. And perhaps you could submit a prize that may one day win $10 million, $20 million, $30 million. So once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Black holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley, and now a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, we're going to bring on one of the nation's leading science writers, Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine, contributing editor at Discover, American Scientist. You name it, he's written for it. And his next book is coming out next year called Everything All at Once, written with Bill Nye, the science guy. And so once again, Corey Powell is going to talk to us today about space, outer space. What's out there in this great universe of ours? As you know, recently the Juno space mission sailed past Jupiter, a bullseye 500 million miles from the planet Earth, and we hope to find evidence of the origin of the solar system itself. Jupiter, the biggest planet in the solar system, dominates the entire solar system. Our Earth would not have been possible unless the planet Jupiter basically plowed the original solar system, cleaned it out like a vacuum cleaner, and here we are today, compliments of the planet Jupiter. Then we're going to talk about Mars. Is it really possible that one day we can set up a colony on Mars like in The Martian? Or, for that matter, what about terraforming Mars? This is, of course, something that may take centuries, but what about the possibility that one day we may actually create a Garden of Eden on the red planet? And you probably heard that Stephen Hawking, my colleague, has come out with an interesting plan to send the first starship, not just an interplanetary probe, but a first starship to the nearby stars. And he hopes to do it with a starship the size of a postage stamp. That's right. You can forget about the Enterprise. It's simply too expensive to send the Enterprise to the nearby stars. But having a computer, a supercomputer the size of a postage stamp, give us all the information about the universe, that's something that is totally doable. And what about extrasolar planets out there? You know that the Kepler satellite has identified roughly 2,000 extrasolar planets. Well, these and other developments, we're going to be talking with our special guest today, Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine. And also go to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. And you can always give us a call, and you can be on Science Fantastic by calling 866-323-2129. So once again, go to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. We have over 3 million people following on Facebook. And after the break, we're going to talk about the universe with Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Would you like relief from muscle pain, headaches, and discomfort to sleep better, have more energy during the day, and just feel naturally amazing? Fibromalic can help. Its blend of malic acid and magnesium can provide pain relief and comfort for those who experience fibromyalgia. It helps your body absorb more oxygen, and it works quickly for a significant reduction in pain within 48 hours, all without a prescription. Ask for Fibromalic at health and vitamin shops or shop fibromalic.com.
Want to invest but don't know what to do? In search of fixed double-digit rates immune to currency, real estate, and stocks? Discover the alternative asset Barron's Magazine describes as lucrative and safe. An investment immune to Fed manipulation and low interest rates. Request a prospectus guide. Call Cornerstone at 800-222-INFO. 800-222-INFO. That's 800-222-INFO.
I want to talk with you about Evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, The Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution the Beginning is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
I'm Jim LeBlanc with Volunteers of America. When it comes to advertising, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Mark Jones with SunPro Solar. If you're not getting a significant return on your advertising investment, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Blair Cottingham with United Rentals. If you're not happy with the results of your advertising, you gotta call Dan.
Generally, we work with two types of clients. Those who advertise and are worried about their return on investment are those who are frustrated about not getting a better return on investment. You probably don't fall into either of these categories, but if you do, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. In this hour on Science Fantastic, we're going to bring on our special guest today, and we're going to leap into outer space with Corey Powell. Corey Powell is a science editor at Eon Magazine, a contributing editor at Discover and American Scientist. In fact, he was 15 years on staff at Discover, 5 years as an editor-in-chief of Discover Magazine, and he's coming out with his third book. His third book with Bill Nye the Science Guy called Everything All at Once, which is going to be published next year in May of 2017. So, Corey, once again, thank you so much for being on Science Fantastic.
Oh, what a fun place to be. I'm very glad to be here.
Okay. Well, the first question we ask all our guests is, how did you, as a youth, first get interested in science?
Well, I think there was something in my blood or something in my DNA that really from a very young age, I liked classifying things in the world. I liked understanding how things work. Actually, I was very interested in plants when I was a little kid. All the different, you plant different seeds, and a slightly different type of seed produces a totally different kind of plant or flower, and that seemed really amazing to me. And then in second grade, we did a science project. They had a little, Earth and space unit in second grade, and each kid got assigned a planet, and I got assigned the planet Neptune. And I remember thinking, what a ripoff! I don't get Mars where there could be aliens. I don't get Saturn where there's rings. I get Neptune. Who's interested in Neptune? And so I went home and I read. We had one of those those golden books. I don't know if your listeners remember. This was back in the days before the internet. There was a very small tool of things for kids to look at, and these golden books were like little primers about how the world works. So I looked up Neptune. I was reading about Neptune. I thought, oh, actually, Neptune's actually pretty interesting. Neptune's kind of cool. There's a lot of stuff we don't know about it, and the stuff we do know about it is kind of interesting. And it's like a little switch went off in my head. It was the moment when I realized that even the things that I didn't know about that seemed kind of boring about space had all kinds of cool mysteries to them and all kinds of amazing possibilities. And I just kind of got hooked. I got a telescope. My parents got me a subscription to Astronomy Magazine, which was a brand new magazine at the time. And I just I never looked back. But then, when I got to really at the college level and started considering whether I wanted an academic science career, I discovered that in fact I was not that well suited to scientific research. I loved the discovery process. I loved the process of scientific storytelling. I turned out not to have the kind of patience and intellectual depth that some people like you perhaps have to really stick with the research side. But I discovered that I was actually quite good at kind of communicating the scientific discoveries and kind of acting as a conduit between the research community and the larger world. And that's how I ended up in the magazine world. And I've been there pretty much my whole adult life. So I get to be a fellow traveler with a scientist, and occasionally I've in different ways I've participated in some different scientific projects. But it's been a lifelong passion, and it's been a very, very rewarding journey for me.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about Eon Magazine, because you're the science editor there, and also a few things about your work with Discover Magazine as well.
Right. So I've sort of over the years I've made a bit of a kind of a hopscotch through the science journalism world. I worked at Physics Today, which is a magazine really kind of like communicating about physics to physicists. It's very much a kind of a fairly insider perspective. I worked at Scientific American, which is a bit broader and kind of reaching out to educated people who are not necessarily scientists. Then many years at Discover, which is broader still in trying to bring science to the masses. And my latest job is it's an interesting new experiment. So Aeon is a completely digital magazine and quite young. It's just been around since 2012. And it is really, it's kind of it's sort of a work of intellectual passion. It was two academics and publishers in Australia who pulled together some family money and started this magazine basically, to write about, to publish the kinds of articles in science and politics and culture that they themselves wanted to read. And again, like many of my favorite publications, it's really about bridging worlds, about sort of taking these very deep perspectives from academia that don't always make it out into the popular world and delivering it to a wider audience, and trying to achieve a somewhat, I feel like we're in a strangely split world right now where people have access to deeper ideas than they've ever had before, and they also have access to more crazy and superficial information than they've ever had before. So I feel like we're always trying to strike a better balance to make sure that there some of the incredible richness of what's happening in academia, what's happening in scientific research, to make sure that people know that and they can appreciate it and that they can enlarge their lives with it.
Okay, well, let's just move right on. Okay. Let's just move right into, for example, the Juno mission, which grabbed a lot of headlines recently. Tell us a little bit about the importance of the Juno mission and the planet Jupiter.
Well, the two go hand in hand. I mean, what's really Jupiter is the largest planet, and it's not just it's the largest planet. Jupiter is kind of the keystone to understanding how the solar system formed and evolved very, very early on. Jupiter's gravity was really kind of influencing the whole evolution of the early solar system. And there's a lot of evidence now that when the planets were forming, they didn't just kind of like form in the places where they are now. There was a lot of moving around. Like the early solar system was a very kind of erratic and chaotic place. And Jupiter, as the biggest planet, was kind of the conductor of this whole kind of chaotic symphony. So if you can understand how Jupiter formed, you can understand basically how everything was moving around, how water got to the Earth, how Pluto and those other little things got flung out to the outer part of the solar system. Why we have 8 big planets in our solar system and not 2 or 20. There's some basic questions we don't understand about where we came from and whether there are other solar systems that could support life around other stars. So, so understanding Jupiter is kind of like the key to understanding a lot of that, and that is really the focal point of what Juno is about.
Now, Jupiter is the 800-pound gorilla in our solar system, right?
Yeah.
It outweighs all the other planets put together. And in some sense, it's also like a cosmic vacuum cleaner that vacuums out all the comets, meteors, debris. So isn't it true that if it wasn't for Jupiter, life would be impossible on the Earth, that we'd be pelted with asteroids and comets, and there'd be a gigantic crater where we are now in New York City? So we owe it all to Jupiter, right, to clean out the solar system?
Right. This is one of the really interesting questions, which is, what exactly did Jupiter do? Jupiter is both a vacuum cleaner and a snowplow. Jupiter swept up a lot of material, but also rearranged a lot of the flow of where things went. And one of the ideas is that as Jupiter was moving back and forth in its orbit, that it actually shoved a lot of kind of icy comets and asteroids into the inner solar system. Those are things that landed on the very, very early Earth, and that's where our oceans came from. So there's sort of, there may be in fact 2 ways that we have a debt to Jupiter. One is that it helped us early on with water and organic chemicals and things that made life possible, and the other is that later on, as you say, it acted as this vacuum cleaner and kind of protected us from getting bombarded. So again, the question is, if you have another planetary system around another star and it doesn't have a Jupiter, does that mean that those planets there are all out of luck, or are there other ways that you can make an Earth? Is this the only way to do it?
Now, Jupiter is also quite radioactive with lots of radio disturbances as you approach it. And many people are startled to find that a lot of the static we get here on the planet Earth actually comes from Jupiter. So the next time you get snow on your TV, static on your AM radio, you can blame it on the planet Jupiter. But that also makes it rather dangerous to get there, right?
Right. Well, it makes it dangerous if you want to get anywhere close, and that's the real challenge with this Juno mission, because Juno is going to get extremely close to Jupiter. Juno, its closest, is going to get less than 5,000 miles above the cloud tops. So Juno will be closer to the surface of Jupiter than, say, Beijing is to New York. So it can be right there in the thick of it. And that's one of the reasons why this mission is not going to be a terribly long-lasting mission. It's going to last maybe 18 months because the radiation is very, very quickly going to wear down all the electronics and all the systems on the spacecraft. It's actually built with a titanium vault. The electronics are encased in a box of about a quarter-inch thick titanium, just because without that, the probe would be fried instantly.
Now, also, after the mission is completed, as you mentioned, the probe is going to be sent into Jupiter to die. Now, the previous mission, the Galileo mission, was also sent into Jupiter to die. But some people said, well, it's not sterilized. So even though, of course, most of the germs are going to die on the way to Jupiter, is it such a good idea to send probes crashing into other extraterrestrial bodies that have our germs on them? What are your thoughts?
Well, what happens is you have to make trade-offs of, what you want to learn versus how careful do you want to be about not disturbing things. I think the likelihood that there is life on Jupiter or in Jupiter, based on everything we know, the likelihood of that is pretty low. And when you're talking about crashing into Jupiter, you're talking about basically turning this irradiated spacecraft into a flaming meteor. I think the
the risks you're talking about are pretty low. I mean, that said, the reason that we're crashing it into Jupiter instead of just kind of leaving it there in orbit is that if it stays in orbit, there's a chance that eventually it would crash into the moon Europa. And moon Europa is a place where we do think there's a good chance of life. And you definitely do not want to be crashing into a moon that's, it's icy, has an ocean. It's a place where if there are any Earth germs that manage to survive on that spacecraft, Europa is a much more worrisome place to contaminate. So at some point you make your choices of, as soon as you go out and explore, there's some risk of contamination. You just want to do the very best that you can.
And speaking about the Europa mission, right? Wasn't it the Galileo mission that first began to seriously focus interest on whether or not life might exist on an icy moon of Jupiter? So explain to us, how is it possible you could have a liquid ocean underneath the ice cover of a moon that is millions, billions of miles from the stars?
This has certainly been one of the most exciting discoveries in planetary science over the past 20 years or so. Starting with Galileo in the late 90s, realizing that water is not a scarce thing in the universe. Once you get out to Jupiter and beyond, almost all the moons of the giant planets contain a lot of water. But the thinking was always, these are little worlds that are frozen solid. There's nothing interesting or dynamic about them. But it turns out they have gravitational interactions with each other. They're always kind of pushing and pulling at each other. And what happens is, that it creates friction. It's like if you just kind of like squeeze a piece of silly putty or something and it warms up. These moons are expanding and contracting. They're getting what's called tidal heating. They get warmed up inside. And what we're realizing now is that a lot of these moons, a lot of the small icy bodies have oceans inside. Europa has a big ocean inside. Saturn's moon Enceladus has a giant ocean inside. There's now actually pretty good evidence that Pluto has an ocean inside. And that means, if you're looking for liquid water as a place to look for life, we used to always think, you're looking for the Earth, another Earth. You're looking for, a planet that has continents and oceans and blue skies, and it looks like home. But in fact, what we're realizing is most of the liquid water in the solar system, and probably most liquid water in the universe.
Corey, we have to take a short commercial break, but after the break, we're going to talk about Mars and the exploration of the red planet, and one day will we go to the stars. Once again, our special guest today is Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine, contributing editor at Discover, an American Scientist, and his next book is coming out next year called Everything All at Once. So, and you can also give us a call and make a question or make a comment. So stay tuned for the next segment of Science Fantastic.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. With us in this hour is Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine, contributing editor at Discover, an American Scientist magazine. And his next book is coming out next year called Everything All at Once, written with Bill Nye, the science guy. And once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. If you want to get on the air, give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. You'll get a recording. Just leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're listening to, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts will be heard on national radio. Also, check out my website. It's mkaku.org, mkaku.org. Check out my Facebook site. We're up to now 3 million 3 million fans on Facebook. On Twitter, we have 500,000 people on Twitter. And if you go to my website, you'll see what cities I'll be speaking in, talking about my latest book, The Future of the Mind, my third New York Times bestseller. Future of the Mind actually hit number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Well, Corey, where we last left off, we were talking about the exploration of the solar system. And now let's bring it closer to home. Let's talk about Mars. First of all, the question that everyone wants to know is, have we found any evidence whatsoever of any life on the red planet? Yes or no?
This is one of those really annoying times when I'm going to have to say maybe. So, by coincidence, today is the 40th anniversary of the Viking 1 landing, the first landing on Mars, and the only serious experiment that humans have done to look for life on Mars. And, the results of those experiments were very ambiguous. I mean, there was no clear evidence of life, but there were some very strange things. It turned out that we didn't really understand a whole lot about really how you look for life. We didn't understand a whole lot about the chemical complexities of trying to do a science experiment like that on another planet, basically by remote control. So, this is why, you hear these endless headlines of like, oh, NASA's found more water on Mars. They found water here. Life might be there. We have, even after 40 years of exploration and all this different type of research, we still have really very ambiguous information. I think it's pretty clear that if there is life on Mars today, it's probably buried deep underground where there still are traces of water, where there's some warmth, where you're protected from radiation. And you're probably, if the only way you're going to find it is by sending a mission that can drill down deep and it can do very sophisticated research to look for it. So, I mean, the frustrating answer is we're not going to have an absolute answer for a long time, and probably what's going to happen is we're going to look more and more places and not see anything. But it's very hard to prove a negative. It's very hard to prove that there's not life on Mars.
Okay, well, NASA has said that sometime in the 2030s, we don't know for sure, but sometime in the 2030s, we may send a manned mission to the red planet. So first question for you is, did you see the movie The Martian with Matt Damon? And what are your thoughts?
What am I, made of stone?
And what are your thoughts? How realistic is it? And how dangerous is it to go to the red planet? What are your thoughts?
Well, look, going there is completely realistic in terms of technology. If we wanted to send, if you gave NASA, let's say, $200 billion and told them, to finish developing all these technologies and, finish developing the space launch system, this giant rocket that NASA is working on, there's no question in my mind we could send humans to Mars, and we could probably do it on a 20-year time scale. The problem is that right now, that money doesn't exist. Right now, NASA's whole program of sending humans to Mars is pretty much fiction. It's real in the sense that there are engineers who have a pretty good idea of how to do it, and if it were funded, we probably could do it. But it's fiction in the sense that there's no economic backing and there's no political support for it. So I think in all likelihood, somebody like Elon Musk, who can do it using his own resources and do it because he wants to do it, is actually much more likely to be sending humans to Mars than NASA is, not because they don't have the technology, but because they don't have the will, they don't have the political support.
Okay, and speaking about Elon Musk, the billionaire behind PayPal, behind Tesla Motors, and behind SpaceX, Elon Musk has been making headlines. First of all, he said that perhaps one day, in order to make a paradise out of Mars, we should nuke the ice caps. Put hydrogen bombs there, so I'll ask you about that. And the other question is, well, he said that if NASA won't do it, he'll do it, that he'll send a probe to Mars. So let's take a short commercial break, and after the break, we're going to talk about the exploration, not just of Mars, but the stars. Stephen Hawking, my colleague, has come out with an ingenious device to send the first starship to the nearest stars, but it does not look like the Enterprise. So let's take a short commercial break. Once again, if you want to get on Science Fantastic, give us a call. The hotline number is 866 323-2129. All we ask is that you leave your name, call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic.
This is Science Fantastic. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Do you worry a lot? Whether you're a college student, busy professional, parent, or grandparent, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in 1 to 2 weeks. Call 1-800-758-8746 or calmandclever.com.
If you have sciatica, then you know all about the crippling pain that travels from your lower back down your leg when a spasm occurs. It's brutal. In fact, it's enough to take your breath away. Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream helps relieve persistent, shooting pains associated with the sciatic nerve in the lower back and legs. This natural, homeopathic cream contains the most potent ingredients to soothe even the most excruciating pain associated with sciatica. Stop the pain now. Ask for Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream at your local health food store or go online to trasknutrition.com.
As a business owner, or CEO for that matter, are you frustrated with the money you're wasting on advertising? How do I know it's being wasted? Because you see your advertising as an expense. I started my company because I was tired of seeing passionate business owners waste advertising dollars. So what if I could show you how to make your advertising a profit center in 30 days, guaranteed? I know what you're thinking. That's bull. Then challenge me. At no cost to you, I'll show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. If this is important to you, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, in this hour, we have with us Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine, contributing editor at Discover and American Scientist Magazine. And his next book is coming out next year called Everything All at Once. Well, Corey, where we last left off, we were talking about Mars. So, well, what are your thoughts? Of course, science fiction writers talk about one day terraforming Mars, that is making a Garden of Eden out of the red planet. We even had on our radio waves Robert Zubrin, the founder of the Mars Society, who even has a plan to create a Garden of Eden on the red planet. But what are your thoughts? You think that Mars is ripe for colonization, or do we have to wait a few generations?
Let me break that into two questions. Mars is ripe for colonization? Absolutely, no question. Mars is ripe for terraforming? Not anything close to where we are right now. I mean, I think terraforming is a really fun idea to think about, but let's think about that. We're doing terraforming on Earth right now. We're emitting greenhouse gases. We're doing things that are altering the global climate. Just trying to take control of that process and make sure that it doesn't run out of hand. We're not doing a very good job of that with basically every nation on Earth having a very strong interest in making that work. I think we're very, very far away from actually understanding how you would terraform Mars. But let me say, thinking about the idea of how to do it is actually incredibly important because you learn a lot in the process.
Okay, and let's move even further into outer space to the stars. Well, if the Saturn rocket were to go to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star, it would take 70,000 years. So now I want to talk to you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a new board game you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play this game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. Evolution, the beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. There are hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning is available now, only at Target stores. Just look for the big dinosaur on the box in the game section. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. You'll find it all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning. So let's take a short commercial break. And after the break, let's talk about an idea circulated by Stephen Hawking and others to send the first starship to the stars. So let's take a short commercial break. Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. All we ask is that you leave your name, call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts will be heard on national radio. So write this number down, 866-323-2129. Yeah, you're not going to get a busy signal. You get a recording. Simply leave your name, call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and ask your question on national radio.
This is Science Fantastic. Professor Michio Kaku.
Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, our special guest today is Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine. Well, Corey, as you know, my colleague Stephen Hawking made headlines once again by saying that we should go to the stars, not just out to Pluto, but way out there to the stars using a starship, not the size of the Enterprise, but a starship the size of a postage stamp. So could you elaborate?
First of all, let me say, I think this is actually one of the most exciting ideas in space exploration right now. So I'm glad to have a chance to talk about it. I mean, the idea is, the entire history of space exploration, really, the entire history of rocketry going back 1,000 years to the early rockets in China, it's all been based on this idea that basically, you light some chemicals, the flame goes out a little nozzle, and it makes you move. It's a great concept, but it's very limited and very primitive in a lot of ways. The idea that Stephen Hawking is promoting is a thing called a laser light sail. It's a totally different concept where you attach, as you say, a really, really small probe to a very, very large, very lightweight reflective sail, and you blast it with a laser beam. And the laser beam is actually, it gives energy, it gives momentum to the sail. You can accelerate this thing very, very powerfully, and it has no fuel on board. Basically, you have a laser that's on the ground, or maybe it's in orbit or on the moon, but the laser stands still. You're just zapping the spacecraft. The spacecraft, you can accelerate it to, in principle, 5, 10, even 20% the speed of light to 1,000 times faster than anything we've ever built before.
Okay, now let's talk about, well, some of the downsides of the idea. In order to propel it, you need a laser bank capable of generating 100 gigawatts of power. That's 100 nuclear power plants. That's a lot of nuclear power plants aimed very precisely at a postage stamp. So what are your thoughts about whether or not one day we can assemble 100 nuclear power plants to energize this starship?
Short answer, yes. If you're doing pulse power, you don't necessarily need 100. I think you can probably get away with 5 or 10 and some energy storage, and you do very intense energy pulses. If you imagine doing this on the moon, well, I mean, okay, look, the idea of building, let's say, 5 nuclear reactors and a storage system and a solar array on the moon, I'd say ambitious. It's huge, but it's not outside the realm of what we know how to do technologically. Again, how to make the laser sail. You would need a breakthrough in precision pointing. You'd need a huge laser array. You would need a new kind of communication system to get signals back from your little probe. All these things would require significant technology breakthroughs, but they're all, again, based on known principles. We're not talking about warp drive. We're not talking about dilithium crystals. We're not talking about anything kind of make-believe. We're talking about an incredible but realistic extrapolation of things that we know. To my mind, if you were talking about where to put a giant investment to really do a human technology breakthrough, this is one of the great places to do it.
And with the advances in computer technology, you could probably put an entire observatory and science laboratory on the postage stamp so that as it goes to the nearby stars, it'll take detailed photographs and perhaps land on one of these planets and send signals back, right?
Well, so again, part of what's really interesting about this concept, again, because there's no rocket involved. The spacecraft is not sitting on any kind of propulsion system. The spacecraft is really just this little, maybe iPod size or even chip size thing attached to a sail. So the spacecraft could actually be built very cheaply. You could mass produce them. So instead of sending one probe to Alpha Centauri, what if you send 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000? I mean, as crazy as that sounds, almost all the money that you'd be spending is building the laser. The probe itself would cost almost nothing. So you would be sending out giant clouds of spacecraft in different directions, and one of them fails, it doesn't matter. If one of them misses its target, it doesn't matter. It's a completely different way of thinking about space exploration. And you know what? And if it turns out that it doesn't get you to another star, the same technology would be incredibly powerful just for moving around through our solar system, for building like a space transportation network. So it's one of these things where, as far as we can take, every step along the way of the technology would be useful and would be a breakthrough.
Okay, and let's also move forward and talk about what we may find with a starship that could then begin to reach the nearby stars. Recently, with the Kepler satellite and other sources of astronomical instruments, we've been able to detect all sorts of bizarre planets circulating around other star systems, right? Triple star systems. Can you imagine 3 stars in a system with planets going around it? Originally, didn't people think that was beyond natural law?
Let me say, almost everything that we've discovered over the past 20 years of looking at planets around other stars, almost every step along the way, what we've seen is something that the theorists said was impossible. I think this has been a very humbling experience because you think about how does a star make a planet? It's basically, you just have gas, dust, and gravity. It's just the stuff swirling around, and then some of it falls into the star, some of it makes planets. In theory, the physics of that should be pretty simple. But then the reality of, what does a planet look like? Where can planets be? Which planets could support life? Almost every idea that we had about that, almost every answer we had about that turned out to be wrong. When you actually go and look, there are Jupiter-sized planets orbiting closer stars. There's stars around planets around triple stars. The universe is full of surprises.
Okay, Corey, but unfortunately, our time is up. Once again, our special guest today has been Corey Powell, science editor at Eon Magazine, also contributing editor at Discover, American Scientist, and watch for his latest book coming out next year. It's called Everything All at Once, written with Bill Nye, the Science Guy. So, Corey, once again, thank you so much for being on Science Fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. The time flies when we're talking about these things.
Right. Okay, and once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. If you want to get on the airwaves, is 866-323-2129. And perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Black holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. And Science Fantastic, we profiled the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, we're going to talk about medicine. We're going to talk about the ethics of medicine. With us today is one of the nation's leading bioethicists. His name is Dr. Arthur Kaplan, professor of bioethics at New York University. Graduated from Brandeis University, got his PhD at Columbia. He's authored 30 books and 600 research papers in the field called bioethics. Bioethics is the merger or the boundary between biology and medicine on one hand and ethics and politics on the other hand. And we'll be bringing him on in just a few more moments. But first, let me say that you can go to my website to find out what I'm up to. My website is mkaku.org, mkaku.org. And you can also go to my Facebook site, Michio Kaku. And we have now 3 million fans on Facebook. And on Twitter, we have 500,000 fans on Twitter. So find out what the excitement is about by going to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. I'm always on a book tour. I just came from the West Coast, and I'll be going to Texas in a few months. And I'll be talking about my latest book, The Future of the Mind. I have 3 New York Times bestsellers, Physics of the Impossible, talking about time travel, talking about teleportation and Star Trek. Physics of the Future, talking about the next 100 years in robotics, in the economy, in the job market. And the latest book is called The Future of the Mind, talking about how physics is revolutionizing our understanding of the brain, telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, uploading memories. We can do all of the above, even creating an exoskeleton whereby the brain can directly control a mechanical skeleton, giving you the powers of a Superman. So all these things in my books that you can get, and go to my website to find out more. Well, once again, today we're going to talk about bioethics. I first heard about Dr. Arthur Kaplan in the controversy about gene therapy. Is it possible that one day we can change our genetic heritage, eliminate fatal genes, for example? If you are Caucasian, you have to worry about cystic fibrosis. If you're African American, you have to worry about sickle cell anemia. If you're Jewish, you have to worry about Tay-Sachs. Is it possible that one day we can actually alter our genes to eliminate the 5,000 genetic diseases which have haunted the human race since the dawn of humanity? Or, for that matter, what happens if someone misuses it? What happens if people use gene therapy for cosmetic reasons, just to be prettier, or to have an advantage in school, to be smarter and have better powers of concentration? Or athletes, should we allow athletes to genetically modify themselves? Would you pay money? Would you pay money to see two teams of athletes just to find out who's better genetically enhanced and has more money to pay for the latest genetic treatments? I mean, we're talking about ethical questions now. Who pays for this research? Who benefits from this research? And what does it mean if one day there are renegade genes that we cannot control that enter the black market? You know, we can't control the drug market. What happens when illegal genes start to enter the black market? You can spread illegal genes simply by the internet. You don't even need to have drugs that are easily picked up using blood tests. So all these things comprise something called bioethics. And today we're going to talk about the Zika virus. What's behind it? How bad is it? Should the Olympics be canceled as a consequence? And what should the average person do faced with the Zika virus? We're going to talk about sperm banks. Have you heard about the scandals involving sperm banks, which are largely unregulated? That is, one person with schizophrenia disguised the fact that he had schizophrenia, and his sperm was used on many women. Only later they found out that his biography was bogus, and it's not regulated. Or for that matter, look at all the anti-aging creams that you get in a drugstore. You may say to yourself, well, this is snake oil. Why doesn't the FDA regulate it? Well, it turns out it can't. Believe it or not, these anti-aging creams and potions, perhaps they're all fake, all bogus, but they can't be regulated because the FDA doesn't have the power to do so. And we'll also talk about cancer research. Did you know that there's some real, honest-to-goodness breakthroughs that are reproducible, testable, falsifiable, breakthroughs that have met the standard of science? Immunotherapy, actually boosting the immune system of the body for real. Of course, there are a lot of bogus charlatans out there saying that if you eat carrots or whatever, you can boost your immune system to fight off cancer. Wrong. Now let's talk about how scientists can really boost the immune system. And then we find out the fact that cancer is just not one disease. It's perhaps hundreds, thousands of different kinds of diseases. You realize the human body has about 200 different kinds of tissues. Each tissue in turn can be mutated hundreds of times. And do the math. We're now talking about perhaps thousands of different kinds of diseases, all collectively called cancer. So, but however, as I said, there are some real breakthroughs being made. Immunotherapy is one. Another is liquid biopsies. Wouldn't it be great to simply have a simple blood test or eventually a urine test or saliva test, and the test results come almost immediately, and they tell you that you have cancer growing in your body, and you will get a tumor in a few years. This is coming. Think about that. The word tumor might even disappear from the English language.
So now, I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a new board game you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play this game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. Now, to eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their own species. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. There are hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution the Beginning is available now, only at Target stores. Just look for the big dinosaur on the box. In the game section, it's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. You'll find it all at Target stores. Evolution the Beginning.
You are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. And if you want to be part of the fun, give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. All you need to do is leave your name, the call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts will be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So give us a call. 866-323-2129 is the number to call to get on Science Fantastic.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Are you a baby boomer? Afraid of stocks and commodity prices? Want to invest but don't know what to do? Discover the alternative asset class Barron's Magazine describes as both lucrative and safe. Discover high yields without market volatility. Request a prospectus guide. Call Cornerstone at 800-222-INFO. 800-222-INFO. That's 800-222-INFO.
Would you like relief from muscle pain, headaches, and discomfort to sleep better, have more energy during the day, and just feel naturally amazing? Fibromalic can help. Its blend of malic acid and magnesium can provide pain relief and comfort for those who experience fibromyalgia. It helps your body absorb more oxygen, and it works quickly for a significant reduction in pain within 48 hours, all without a prescription. Ask for Fibromalic at health and vitamin shops or shop fibromalic.com.
Do you worry a lot? Whether you're a college student, busy professional, parent, or grandparent, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in 1 to 2 weeks. Call 1-800-758-8746 or calmandclever.com.
Hello, here I am, Roy Masters, 55 years on talk radio and still saving lives. Please continue helping the Foundation of Human Understanding by simply donating $19.95 per month. Paying it forward plan will continue saving lives into the years to come. I'm a pioneer in helping our troops to overcome the ravages of PTSD without drugs. Go to FHU.com and then click on the donation page. That's FHU.com.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
I'm Jim LeBlanc with Volunteers of America. When it comes to advertising, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Mark Jones with SunPro Solar. If you're not getting a significant return on your advertising investment, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Blair Cottingham with United Rentals. If you're not happy with the results of your advertising, you gotta call Dan.
Generally, we work with two types of clients. Those who advertise and are worried about their return on investment are those who are frustrated about not getting a better return on investment. You probably don't fall into either of these categories, but if you do, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. In this hour, we're going to be talking about some of the biggest stories in public health. And with us today, once again, is Dr. Arthur Kaplan, perhaps the nation's leading bioethicist. And he's the William F. and Virginia Connolly Mitty Professor of Bioethics at New York University. So today, we're going to be talking about the Zika virus. We're going to be talking about sperm banks. We're going to be talking about cancer research and all the headlines that you've been reading concerning medicine. So, Arthur, glad you could be on Science Fantastic.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, first question that we always ask our guests is, how did you as a youth first get interested in science?
Well, it's interesting. Unlike you, I wasn't really drawn into the physical sciences, but I had a huge interest in medicine, and it was because when I was a little boy, I was one of the last people in North America who had polio. People can barely remember that disease, but it was a paralyzing disease. It often paralyzed your lungs and your diaphragm, the muscle you need to breathe. And when that happened, you wound up in something called an iron lung, which was a very primitive machine that sort of replaced through pressure the function of the diaphragm. But you couldn't really live in there forever, and a lot of children sadly died. I recovered, but I was in the hospital for 9 months, and I had to go to rehabilitation because if you lie in a bed for a long, long time, you lose your muscle tone. So I had to learn to walk again. So that was really a pivotal experience, obviously, in some ways for me. I was a real little boy. I was only 7, but it got me thinking about taking on terrible diseases, what could be done to prevent them, what could be done to treat them.
Okay, and what steered you in the direction of medicine and specifically bioethics? First of all, what is bioethics, and how did you become one of the pioneers in that subject?
Well, this is a somewhat of a connection back to the polio. So when I was there, people weren't telling us the truth as kids. They'd say Johnny went home, but it was clear that Johnny hadn't gone home because we all knew he was dying. And they wouldn't tell us the truth. You couldn't have your parents stay over at that time. The only thing they managed to get to me when I was in the hospital for that long period of time was my homework. I didn't see my dog. I didn't see my sisters, which wasn't the worst penalty on earth at the time, but at least I would have liked to have seen my family and so forth. So all these ethical issues were coming up, and I'm sure that they fueled my interest not just in medicine, but in sort of how we treat patients, how we treat kids in the hospital, and I'm happy to say we've had some improvements. But that gives you an idea of what bioethics does. It tries to look at how are we dealing with patients? Do we give them the appropriate information? Do we get their consent to do things, whether it's research or therapy? Do we protect their privacy? Do we treat them with dignity and respect? Do we respect cultural and religious diversity? So concepts that listeners will know about, the idea that you have to give your consent before someone does research on you, bioethics helped bring that into practice. The idea that you have a right to know your diagnosis, that comes from bioethics. The notion that you could fill out an advance directive, a written document, and say, this is how I want my end-of-life care to go. If I can't speak, if I can't communicate, or this should speak for me, that was from bioethics. Indeed, I played a personal role in pushing that through. And then we also get into tough questions like if there's not enough medicine to treat Zika or Ebola, who should get scarce medicines, rationing. We get into issues about how far can you go to force people to accept vaccinations in the name of public health. So you're looking across the board at ethical issues at the bedside and then ethical issues in health policy and research. What do new technologies do in terms of raising issues, some of which we'll talk about, and then day to day, how can we improve sort of the quality of the experience for patients?
Yes, and speaking about polio, I still remember the March of Dimes.
Yes.
TB, polio, those were things that we had to worry about as kids back in those days. And the March of Dimes was very prominent in terms of raising funds to fight polio.
It was one of the real first, what we would call today, crowdsourced things. No internet, no ability to do it online, but Roosevelt, who had polio, and other political leaders got behind the idea of raising money to take on the disease, and people sent their dimes in. And believe it or not, the March of Dimes Foundation is still around today. Polio hasn't gone away. The March of Dimes has moved on to some other diseases in North America. They deal with Down syndrome and genetic issues and other kids' diseases, but it's still here, and it's based on that foundation from the polio years of the 50s.
Okay. Well, let's just jump right into some of the headlines of today. And one of the big stories, of course, is the Zika virus and the Olympics in Brazil. So first of all, what is the Zika virus and how dangerous is it?
So Zika is a virus that basically can spread through mosquitoes. Sometimes we call them vectors. And there's a subspecies of mosquito that carries both Zika, another disease that listeners may have heard of called dengue, and actually one called chikungunya disease. And these are viruses that get into our body by, as I said, the mosquito biting us. They get into our bloodstream, and then they circulate around. In the case of Zika, if you're a young fetus, the virus can affect your development. We've all seen those terrible pictures of kids born with small heads and deformed brains. This virus actually is somehow capable of getting into the brain itself, which is unusual, but it's a very small and aggressive virus. And Zika can also be spread sexually. So sexual transmission is definitely possible, a little bit like AIDS. It's not a virus that mutates quickly, so maybe we can get a vaccine for it, but we don't have one yet.
Okay, and of course, the Olympics are in the news, and the question is, well, first of all, is it a good idea to have the Olympics and have literally millions of people go to the epicenter, or one of the epicenters of the Zika virus epidemic? Your thoughts?
Well, let me plug an idea here. We just put up a guide to travel to the Olympics, and if people want to see it, they can go to NYU Langone, Langone, Medical Ethics, and you'll go right to the page, and they'll give you lots of information. But assuming you're not doing that right now, the answer is if you're of reproductive age, I'm not sure it's a good idea to go down there. It doesn't look like they're going to postpone the games or move them. That just isn't happening. So they're going to happen. As listeners know, some athletes have decided not to go. Some tourists, a pretty good number, have decided not to go. I think you're at greater risk if you're pregnant and a woman, or if you're trying to have a baby, because the babies suffer the most from Zika. But I would urge people to think hard about whether they're going to travel there if they're thinking about having a child. Certainly wouldn't go there if you were pregnant or might have possibly become pregnant. That's a really dangerous trip to be taking.
Now, some people say that the U.S. is basically perhaps a sitting duck for an epidemic because, of course, mosquitoes are found throughout the United States, especially in the South, and that's how they are spread. So what are your thoughts about how serious it could evolve into the coming years?
So it's dangerous. There are probably 60 countries that have Zika. We've had a couple of cases in Florida. Certainly it's all over Puerto Rico. And here's why it's particularly troubling. Remember, the mosquitoes bite you, and then you can be bitten by other mosquitoes, and it sort of spreads around that way. Or there's this sexual transmission if you have the virus in you, and we know it lasts for at least weeks, maybe months, in people's bodies. One of the difficult problems is you don't really see the birth defects problem until 9 months later. So even with Zika breaking out in the U.S. and Puerto Rico, we're not going to see the results of that, the tragic results, for many more months because people won't have kids for a while, even if they've been bitten in the summer. Congress did something unethical. They didn't spend any money to prevent Zika. What you do is you want money to kill mosquitoes. You want to teach people how to put on bug repellent and make sure they do it frequently, wear long clothing, try to stay indoors. So there are things that can be done, but Congress decided in its infinite wisdom, no money for this. And I think that really is one of the great unethical public health decisions that's ever been made.
Now, it seems that every week or so we discover new things about this virus. At first we thought it could be contained, it only affects certain populations. Now we realize it can be spread by sex and other means. So there could be other surprises out there, right? We're still in a learning curve. Well, we have to take a short commercial break, but after the break, I want to ask you about the future. I mean, could it really spread? Are there more surprises lurking concerning the Zika virus? And what should people do? Should people buy mosquito net, repellent? What procedures can people take? Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Leave your name, the call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts will be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. And once again, our special guest today is Dr. Arthur Kaplan, one of the nation's leading bioethicists, now at New York University. And so once again, this is Science Fantastic. Give us a call at 866-323-2129.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, on the line, we have Dr. Arthur Kaplan, one of the nation's leading bioethicists, talking about the juncture between medicine and ethics. And we are right now talking about the Zika virus. And we should also point out that he is a professor of bioethics at New York University's Medical Center. He got his undergraduate degree at Brandeis College University and his PhD at Columbia University. He was a director of the Center for Bioethics at the University of Pennsylvania, and now he's at New York University. Well, Arthur, we were talking about the Zika virus, but some people say that maybe there are more surprises lurking in the science of that disease. I mean, look at the AIDS virus, right? That turned out to be a lot more difficult and a lot more deadly than anyone ever suspected. So what are your thoughts about the Zika virus? It seems that every week or so there's another surprise.
Let me mention a couple of things that have turned out to be surprises. One is people thought that your body attacked the virus, its immune system, and got rid of it. It turns out that the World Health Organization was saying, look, if you've been in a Zika place, just don't have sex, unprotected sex without a condom for 4 weeks. We've got cases now being reported 60 days of people showing the virus in their body. We don't really know how long it stays in there. I'm not going to say it stays in forever, but I would be very surprised if we weren't actually giving out bad advice. We probably need to say, if you've been exposed to Zika in the Zika area, don't try to have a kid for months. We didn't understand that. And given the outcome, the risk, that's bad. We learned that this virus can cause something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's rare, but it's a terrible paralysis that affects our nerves that control muscles. We never associated that with the Zika virus. And we found out that it's not just sex, but you could transmit this through kissing and kind of fluid exchange like you see with other viruses. Didn't really understand that. So we're really learning a lot about this strain of Zika, this particularly nasty one that causes these birth defects in babies, and I don't think we're done learning about it yet.
So in other words, there could be like walking time bombs out there, right? People that have been infected, but they think they're safe, but there they are transmitting the virus to all sorts of people, right?
A little bit like Typhoid Mary, not showing symptoms, didn't know she was sick, but spreading the disease all over the place. And that's one of the real fears I have, is if you bring all these people to the Olympics in a place where there has been Zika, and there are clearly infected people, and they kind of have a party and maybe have relations with one another, then you're bringing it back to countries that didn't have Zika as they travel home.
And what about a vaccine? We don't have one yet, but what are the chances that we can get a vaccine in the coming months to years?
Well, I think the chances are good, partly because unlike HIV, which the virus mutates as a kind of natural defense against the body's immune system, it mutates fast. This one is slow, and why that's so, I don't know, but it's a fairly stable genetic makeup. So when that's true, vaccines work very well. We don't have it yet, but I think there are a lot of clinical trials underway in humans of trial vaccines, and I bet we get one by next year. That's why I was saying it might make sense to postpone the Olympics, because it would be better to do it when you had this vaccine.
Okay, now some people say, well, before we had the Ebola scare, and there could be other germs out there lurking that are perhaps even ancient. And perhaps they've been there for thousands of years, and only recently have humans begin to encroach upon their natural territory, which means that as humanity spreads into the jungle, into the savannas and what have you, there could be other diseases out there that will catch us totally off guard. What are your thoughts?
Well, we're certainly getting more diseases moving out because humans are moving into places where animals are. I'm sure that's what happened with Ebola. I think West Nile virus, which used to be obviously in Africa, over here, again because of greater contact with wild places. But it's also transportation. You know, people get on planes, and pretty soon what used to be in one part of the world within 24 hours can be anywhere in the world. And that clearly is part of a transmission that occurred for Ebola. I'm very sure it's part of the reason that West Nile is here. I'll give you one disease we forgot about, an infectious disease that's old. It's our old friend, the flu. You know, remember we were all concerned, 4 or 5 years ago about pandemic flu, meaning just a rapidly spreading form of flu that's especially lethal. Well, that hasn't gone away. We're watching that virus. If it were to, again, undergo some further genetic changes, it could become more contagious and nasty. It's a virus that moves through poultry, sometimes through geese and wild birds, and they spread it all over the place. So we really need to come up with a vaccine there, but I kind of worry that we don't have the resources still to take on these particular public health challenges.
Now, some people think that animals are actually one of the largest reservoirs of these hidden viruses. And, for example, the SARS virus, which caused such a scare in Asia. And, well, you can't get rid of animals, right? So we just may have to live with the fact that as humanity spreads, there are going to be more things jumping out of the forest. Well, we have to take another short commercial break. But after the break, I also want to talk to you about the controversy concerning sperm banks. How safe are our sperm banks? Once again, you're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. All we ask is that you leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're listening to, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts can be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So once again, you're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. It's one of the nation's in a field called bioethics. Dr. Arthur Kaplan, professor at New York University's Medical Center. So stay tuned as we continue a discussion of ethics and medicine.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Do you worry a lot? If you're forgetful, nervous, moody, or overwhelmed, chances are you're not protecting yourself from the ravaging effects of stress and anxiety. No matter the cause, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, your quality of life, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in as little as 1 to 2 weeks and increase your ability to recall facts, names, and numbers in 4 to 12 weeks. Calm and Clever was created by scientist Kurt Hendricks, a principal investigator in 2 NIH-funded studies on Alzheimer's disease. Try Calm and Clever for 2 months. You'll feel the difference. Call 1-800-758-8746 or go to calmandclever.com.
Want to invest but don't know what to do? In search of fixed double-digit rates immune to currency, real estate, and stocks? Discover the alternative asset Barron's magazine describes as lucrative and safe. An investment immune to Fed manipulation and low interest rates. Request a prospectus guide. Call Cornerstone at 800-222-INFO. 800-222-INFO. That's 800-222-INFO.
If you have sciatica, then you know all about the crippling pain that travels from your lower back down your leg when a spasm occurs. It's brutal. In fact, it's enough to take your breath away. Dr. Zhang's sciatica nerve cream helps relieve persistent, shooting pains associated with the sciatic nerve in the lower back and legs. This natural, homeopathic cream contains the most potent ingredients to soothe even the most excruciating pain associated with sciatica. Stop the pain now. Ask for Dr. Zhang's sciatica nerve cream at your local health food store or go online to trasknutrition.com.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. This hour we're talking about bioethics. So with us today is one of the nation's leaders in that field of bioethics, Dr. Arthur Caplan, professor at New York University's Medical Center. He did his undergraduate work at Brandeis University, PhD at Columbia University, and he was the director of the Center for Bioethics at the University of Pennsylvania, and now he's at New York University. Well, moving into another subject, sperm banks, of all things, have been in the news. We had one story where somebody who was schizophrenic, his sperm was basically disseminated to quite a few women who were shocked to find that out. And we have other stories as well. So the question is, are sperm banks regulated? Are we going to find more and more of these scandals?
Well, this is an issue I've been very worried about for decades. And the short answer to your question, Michio, is no, they're not really regulated. They do have rules about screening for infectious diseases, HIV in the sperm, but in terms of whether they keep good records, lose things, errors, and even when a sperm bank is bought and sold, because they are, whether they transfer all the materials and properly identify them, there are no regulations. So a lot of people go and they say, boy, I would like to get a sperm donor, and I think I might get a physicist and someone who's also a great chess player and someone who's a great physical specimen, and I picked them out of a book, and that's who I want to be my donor. Well, that's fine, except people's records in these sperm banks are about as good as 19th century grocery store inventories. That is, they might be written in pencil. There's no standard template. They're not even electronic. Whether that person told the truth about who they were when they were the donor isn't really checked. So a lot of people wind up getting donations that involve people with illnesses that are hereditary, and we've seen that in the story you mentioned and in others. Samples are overused. Everybody says, yep, I want the genius physicist who's also a great athlete. So they use the same sample again and again, leading to incest that is unknown because the children meet each other and they don't realize they have the same father. And I could go on, but it's really an area where we could use a lot more oversight and a lot tougher regulation, both to protect the people who use it and to protect their children.
And speaking about regulation, every time you go to the drugstore, you're hit with all these anti-aging potions. Take 10 years off your face. Be young again. And you say to yourself, I mean, come on, give me a break. What are your thoughts?
I would just say, if you want to live longer and you want to not age as fast, watch your diet and do a lot of exercise. I think that'll get you where you want to go with the best odds.
Okay. Once again, you're listening to Dr. Arthur Caplan, director, first of all, professor at New York University and a specialist in bioethics. Once again, this is Dr. Michio Kaku, and this is Science Fantastic. Stay tuned now as we continue a discussion of cancer research. What works? What doesn't? What about immunotherapy, proton therapy, and everything else? And give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129.
You're listening to Science Fantastic. You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. With us today is one of the nation's leading bioethicists, Dr. Arthur Caplan of New York University. He's written more than 30 books, more than 600 papers in peer-reviewed journals. He got his undergraduate degree at Brandeis University, PhD at Columbia University, and now he's a professor at New York University. Well, we just had a discussion of what doesn't work, that is all these anti-aging creams that you get at the drugstore. I understand that it's difficult for the FDA to regulate them because they don't penetrate the skin. However, if they don't penetrate the skin, that means they don't work, which means that they can only advertise their nonsense because it doesn't work.
I think in anti-aging stuff for the skin, I think you're exactly right. It's like spreading fairy dust. If it doesn't get inside any cells, it's not going to do anything. And part of the reason you can sell it is it doesn't get anywhere. In terms of other stuff, stuff that you do swallow or eat, pills and other food claims, again, the FDA doesn't regulate food. They are restricted to devices and drugs and vaccines. That's what they regulate. And so they really just don't have any authority to go out there and say, this stuff is no good. By the way, there's also no control over what's in it. So whether it contains, impure ingredients or dangerous stuff, nobody's watching.
I saw an interview with a dermatologist who actually said there's only one ingredient which actually works in all the cosmetics, and that is moisturizers, because they seal in the water.
I'll tell you one other one that works.
Yeah?
Don't go in the sun.
Right. The absence
that works
of sunlight.
very, very well.
Right. Well, now let's talk about cancer because, there are therapies which do seem to work. Immunotherapy is getting a lot of publicity, and Vice President Joe Biden has even declared that we need a new moonshot, just like the Apollo program that put our men on the moon. What are your thoughts about the latest cancer research?
Well, it's an exciting time in cancer research, and here's why. We're starting to understand the biological, genetic differences that individuals have that make them more prone to getting breast cancer. We all remember Angelina Jolie's testing and finding out her risk factors before she had breast cancer. We're starting to be able to do it for many forms of cancer. In fact, we're also starting to understand that cancer has many forms. I'm ready to say it's probably a multiplicity of diseases that we've traditionally called cancer, but now we start to understand they have different mechanisms, different kinds of cells, different types of problems, and so we're probably going to have to diversify our understanding of what cancer is, that what's a melanoma is not the same thing as what's going on if you have a small cell lung cancer. So we're starting to understand what puts us at risk, but we're also starting to understand that these cancers make distinctive chemicals when they're in our bodies, and we have some tricks. Some drugs will target those chemicals, known as proteins, that the cancers make and then kill those cells without hurting the rest of our cells. Problem with chemotherapy and radiation is they kill everything, so that's why we have those horrible side effects. But the new generation of drugs says, there's a stealth little cancer cell. It's putting out a tiny amount of a very distinctive chemical. I'm going to go after that chemical so it just kills the cancer cell. What could be better than that? Precision. That's where the precision medicine idea comes from. And sometimes you can actually get the body's own immune cells to go after those same chemicals if you boost them. So all very exciting. We're seeing advances in diseases like multiple myeloma, terrible cancer, blood cancer that's horrible, really starting to get the ability to cure it, starting to see progress in many, many areas of prostate cancer and other types of cancer. So that's the moonshot idea that Biden is pushing. The time is right. Unfortunately, again, Congress, too cheap. They only budgeted $1 billion. It takes more than $1 billion to do something like get rid of all these forms of cancer. So while I'm not against the moonshot, I would say it's a little bit more like think of it like a single prop plane shot. It's not going to take us to the moon. It's probably going to take us a little bit, but it's not going to take us that far.
Also, what's making news is liquid biopsies. That is a simple blood test that may one day indicate that you have cancer colonies growing in your body, maybe years before a tumor actually forms.
Absolutely.
This is incredible.
So remember I mentioned these tiny little chemicals. Well, you should be able to get them out of your circulating blood, and they're a sign that, something's starting to go wrong. Being able to pick that up. We don't have the liquid biopsy yet, but it's coming. It will be here. I'm going to say 2 to 3 years. I'll go out on a limb.
Right, and perhaps it means that you can have an early warning system, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
the drugs that we use now to treat a cancer, some of them are going to turn out to be very effective in preventing a cancer. So you will even see people listeners may have heard of cancer vaccines. Well, you probably could inject yourself with some immune boosters if you were prone to getting a particular kind of cancer and prevent the cancers from even getting a hold in your body.
And what about immunotherapy? I mean, it's effective against certain forms of cancers, but not in general. But what are your thoughts about immunotherapy? That is boosting the immune system.
So boosting the immune system, there have been all kinds of quacks and nuts who've run around saying, take this and it'll boost your immune system. People try to sell us stuff to do that for the common cold. Turns out the common cold is one of those viruses that mutates all the time. You don't know what the heck to do with it still. Still one of our toughest nuts. I wouldn't take an immune booster there. But for things like cancer, the body does try constantly to pick off new cancer cells, and they're actually forming in all of us more than we'd like to believe. That is, these incipient cancers get started, and then our immune system finds them. If you could get that system to be stronger, boost it or help it with drugs, or try to grow more of those cells in the body, I think we could find ourselves starting to be immunized against different forms of cancer.
Okay, well, unfortunately, our time is up. So once again, Dr. Kaplan, thank you so much for being on Science Fantastic.
And thank you for having me.
And once again, our special guest today in this hour has been Dr. Arthur Kaplan, professor of bioethics at New York University, author of 30 books, 600 research papers, and he is one of the nation's leading authorities in the field called bioethics. And you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. You can always give us a call at 866-323-2129. So give us a call because this is Science Fantastic.